Everyone laughed when the maid's daughter entered the bank, until the billionaire saw her balance. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The elegant, marble-floored bank lobby was filled with the soft hum of quiet conversations and the clinking of coffee cups. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and leather, a typical scent of power and wealth. Men and women dressed in their finest suits moved with a purpose, each one an embodiment of financial success. Among them, a young girl stood out, her clothes simple and humble, a stark contrast to the affluent crowd around her. She was no more than 13, with unkempt hair and a nervous look in her eyes. Her hands fidgeted with the edges of her worn-out jacket as she stood in line at the bank's counter. To anyone observing, it was clear she didn't belong here. Some patrons whispered to each other, casting curious and mocking glances at the girl who seemed so out of place. A few rolled their eyes and smirked, dismissing her as just another poor child lost in a world of affluence. She had no reason to be here, or so they thought. Her story wasn't one of inherited wealth or business acumen. It was simply one of necessity. Her mother, a housekeeper, had worked tirelessly for years in this very bank, cleaning its spotless floors and ensuring its pristine image. And now, her daughter had come to open an account, a small but significant step towards a better future. The girl stepped up to the counter with a nervous breath. The bank clerk, a man in his 30s with a polished appearance, looked down at her. He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised to see such a young person at the bank. He was ready to brush her off as just another child and over their head, but the girl held his gaze with a quiet determination. She pulled a small slip of paper from her pocket and handed it to him, her hands trembling slightly. "I'd like to open an account," she said in a voice that was barely above a whisper, but steady nonetheless. The clerk glanced at the paper, then at her, then back down at the paper. He was about to ask for her identification when something caught his eye. The slip of paper she had handed him wasn't just a request for a basic account. It was a bank form, and there was a number on it, a balance number. That made him stop in his tracks. Confused, he looked up at the girl, and then back at the slip. The number was impossible. She must have made a mistake. No one in their right mind could have that amount in their account. "Is this correct?" he asked, his voice rising slightly in disbelief. The girl nodded, her expression unreadable. She didn't seem worried at all. The clerk cleared his throat and, still unsure, called over the bank manager, a tall man with slicked-back hair who was busy overseeing a meeting in the corner. The manager, seeing the scene unfolding, quickly walked over with a slight frown. He too glanced at the slip of paper, and then he did a double take. The number on the form was astronomical. No way. It was far more than most of the wealthy patrons in the bank had. In fact, it was enough to make the manager pause, unsure of how to proceed. He looked at the girl again, his skepticism slowly giving way to a sense of awe. He had to know more. He gently motioned for the clerk to step aside, and then he turned to the young girl. "Can you tell me, how did you come to have this?" he asked, his tone softer now, full of curiosity. The girl smiled faintly, not a trace of shame or fear on her face. "It's my mother's account," she said simply. "She's been saving for years. She didn't want to take charity, so she worked hard and saved every penny. I just need to open my own account now. It's time." The manager's jaw tightened in realization. The sum was far beyond what he had expected from a humble housekeeper's savings. This was no small amount. This wasn't just a random deposit. It was the result of years of sacrifice, hard work, and perseverance. As he processed the information, the banker's skepticism vanished completely, replaced by deep respect for the young girl standing before him. He reached across the counter, taking the slip from her hands and gently placing it into the file. "I think," he said, his voice filled with awe, "we can open that account for you today." The manager turned to his staff, signaling them to proceed with the formalities. As they worked, the girl quietly thanked him, her eyes gleaming with quiet pride. The whispers around her had stopped. The patrons who had mocked her just moments ago now watched in stunned silence, as the girl, the one they had all assumed was nothing more than an insignificant child, was revealed to be something far more extraordinary. A wave of respect slowly spread through the room as the girl stood there, the weight of her mother's hard work now fully acknowledged by the very people who had once dismissed her. And as the girl left the counter, her balance securely established, a new sense of purpose filled the air. No one in the room would ever forget the quiet girl who had stepped into the bank with nothing but a humble request, and left with the respect of a roomful of powerful people. As the young girl stepped away from the counter, she couldn't help but feel a weight lifting off her shoulders. The bank manager, who had been so skeptical just moments ago, was now smiling at her with genuine respect. She had done it. The account was officially hers, and the sum in it was enough to change the course of her future. But little did she know, the real impact of that moment was just beginning to unfold. The room had fallen silent, the once dismissive whispers now replaced with hushed conversations. The powerful patrons who had looked at her with disdain just minutes before now watched with admiration, some even with envy. She could feel their eyes following her as she made her way to the door, the sound of her footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. As she stepped outside into the crisp morning air, she took a deep breath, savoring the victory. It was a small victory, but one that had been hard-earned. Her mother's sacrifices, the long hours of work and endless toil, had paid off. She had inherited more than just money. She had inherited a legacy of resilience, determination, and quiet strength. She didn't have to prove anything to anyone. But that moment at the bank had proved something to her. She was capable of achieving anything. Her eyes scanned the bustling streets outside the bank, and she felt a sense of pride that she had never known before. She was no longer just a housekeeper's daughter. She was a person with her own identity, her own future. It was a future that she had the power to shape. But just as she was about to walk away, a sleek black car pulled up in front of her. The tinted windows rolled down, and she saw the familiar face of the billionaire, the one who had been observing her inside the bank. He looked at her, his expression unreadable, before he spoke. "I saw what just happened inside," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "You impressed me." The girl was taken aback. She hadn't expected him to approach her, let alone speak to her. She had been so focused on her own success that she hadn't even noticed him standing in the background, watching her every move. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't mean to impress anyone. I just needed to do this for myself." The billionaire regarded her for a moment, as if considering something. Then, he gestured toward the car. "I want to offer you an opportunity," he said. "You've proven that you have the drive and the intelligence to make something of yourself. I could help you with that. I have connections. I have resources. And I believe you could do great things." The girl hesitated. She had always been taught to be cautious, to trust no one. But something about the way he spoke, the sincerity in his voice, made her pause. Could this really be an opportunity for her? Could this be her chance to break free from the life she had always known? "I'm not asking for anything in return," the billionaire continued. "I just want to see you succeed. Consider it an investment in your future." The girl looked at him, unsure of what to say. She had never been offered such an opportunity before. But at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this encounter, was more than just a simple offer. It was a turning point in her life. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and now, it seemed that her hard work was being noticed by someone who had the power to change everything. Finally, she nodded, her decision made. "I'll consider it," she said, her voice filled with determination. "But I'll do it on my terms." The billionaire smiled, a rare expression that softened his face. "I wouldn't expect anything less." With that, the car pulled away, leaving her standing on the sidewalk, her heart racing with the weight of the decision she had just made. The world had changed for her in that moment, and she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Days passed since the unexpected encounter with the billionaire. The young girl, whose name was Emma, couldn't shake off the offer that had been made to her. She found herself at a crossroads. On one hand, she had the life she knew, a life built on hard work and modest means. On the other, there was the promise of a new future, one filled with opportunities she had never even imagined. As she walked home from school one afternoon, her thoughts kept drifting back to the conversation with the billionaire. His offer had sounded too good to be true. Yet, There was something about the sincerity in his voice that made her believe he wasn't just trying to use her. She had always been taught to trust her instincts, and her gut told her that this could be the chance she had been waiting for. But there was one thing she was sure of. If she were to take the billionaire's offer, it would have to be on her own terms. Emma didn't want to be seen as someone who had been handed everything. She had worked too hard to get this far to just let someone else pull the strings of her future. She wasn't sure what this opportunity would lead to, but one thing was clear. She was going to have to work for it. That evening, after her mother had gone to bed, Emma sat at the small desk in the corner of her room, staring at the piece of paper in front of her. It was a letter to the billionaire. She had been thinking about it for days, writing and rewriting the words in her mind. Now, it was time to put her thoughts into action. The letter was simple, but it carried the weight of her decision. She thanked him for the opportunity, but she made it clear that she would only accept it if she was given the chance to prove herself. She didn't want a handout. She wanted to show him that she could succeed on her own. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into an envelope. She wasn't sure how long it would take for him to respond, but she knew that this was the first step towards something bigger than herself. The next day, Emma went to school as usual, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't concentrate on her lessons, her thoughts constantly drifting to what the billionaire's response would be. Would he respect her decision? Would he think she was being too bold? She didn't know. What she did know was that she couldn't sit back and wait for someone to decide her future for her. She had to take control. The following week, a letter arrived at her house. Emma's heart raced as she saw the envelope. It was from the billionaire. She opened it slowly, reading the words carefully. His response was everything she had hoped for. He admired her determination and agreed to work with her, but only under the condition that she prove herself through hard work, not by relying on his influence. He made it clear that he was offering her an opportunity, not a guarantee. It was up to her to make the most of it. Emma's heart swelled with pride as she read the letter. This was her chance. She wasn't going to let it slip through her fingers. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Emma worked harder than she ever had before, taking on internships, learning new skills, and pushing herself to be the best version of herself. She was determined to prove that she could succeed on her own, with or without the billionaire's help. Slowly, but surely, she began to make a name for herself in the business world. The opportunities that had once seemed out of reach were now within her grasp. She was no longer just the daughter of a housekeeper. She was someone who had earned her place. As the months went by, Emma's confidence grew. She had proven herself to the billionaire, but more importantly, she had proven herself to herself. The journey was far from over, but one thing was certain. Emma had taken control of her future, and there was no turning back. Months passed, and Emma's life began to shift in ways she never imagined. Her mornings were spent in meetings and internship projects, while her evenings were dedicated to studying business strategies and refining her skills. She had become a force to be reckoned with in the business world, but the journey was far from easy. Every day, she encountered challenges that tested her resolve. Her classmates, many of whom came from affluent families, were still skeptical of her success. They whispered about her, questioning how a maid's daughter could have made it this far. But Emma never let their doubts shake her. Instead, she worked harder, pushing herself to achieve more, determined to prove them wrong. The day she received an email that would change her life forever arrived unexpectedly. It was from the billionaire who had offered her the opportunity months ago. She opened it, her heart racing. The email was short but powerful. Emma, I've been following your progress, and I'm impressed with how far you've come. I believe it's time for you to take the next step. I'm offering you a position in one of my companies, as an executive assistant to oversee some of our most important projects. You've earned it. Emma couldn't believe her eyes. She had done it. Her hard work, her commitment to proving herself, had finally paid off. The job would come with a salary that far exceeded anything she had ever imagined, and more importantly, it was a step towards the future she had been striving for. But even with the opportunity now in her hands, Emma knew that the real challenge was just beginning. She had worked for years to reach this point, and now, she had to prove that she could handle the responsibility that came with the new role. She accepted the offer without hesitation, ready to take on whatever came next. As she stepped into her new role at the company, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. The office was sleek and modern, with large glass windows offering a stunning view of the city. Her new colleagues, many of whom were highly successful professionals, greeted her with polite smiles, but Emma could sense the undercurrent of doubt in their eyes. They had heard of the maid's daughter who was now among them. But would she be able to keep up? She didn't know, but she was determined to try. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, presentations, and intense work. Emma found herself overwhelmed at times, but she refused to back down. She stayed late, studied the company's history, and quickly learned the ins and outs of her new position. Slowly but surely, she earned the respect of her colleagues. They began to notice her work ethic, her sharp insights, and her ability to get things done efficiently. One day, as she was leaving the office late at night, the billionaire called her. "Emma," he said, "I've been hearing good things about you. I just wanted to say how proud I am of what you've accomplished. You've proven yourself, and I'm excited to see what you'll do next." Those words, simple as they were, meant more to Emma than anything she had heard before. They were the validation she had longed for, the acknowledgement of her hard work. She had made it. But despite the success and the new opportunities, Emma remained grounded. She knew where she came from, and she knew the sacrifices her mother had made for her to get to this point. She still remembered the quiet moments at the bank, the doubts, the whispers, and as she walked out of the office that night, her head held high, she knew that this was just the beginning of something even bigger. As Emma settled deeper into her role, she began to notice the subtle shifts around her. The whispers that had once filled the hallways about the maid's daughter slowly faded, replaced by discussions of her sharp intellect, relentless drive, and impressive results. Her reputation had transformed, but with it came new challenges. People now expected more from her, and the pressure began to mount. The office, once a place where she felt like an outsider, had become a familiar battleground. Yet, every day she stepped into the role with a sense of purpose. She had worked too hard to get here, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. One day, she found herself in a meeting with a group of senior executives, each one more seasoned and powerful than she could have ever imagined. The topic was critical, a multi-million-dollar partnership that could make or break the company's future. The board was divided, and the discussion grew tense. Emma had been listening closely, taking mental notes as everyone presented their arguments. It was her turn. Her heart raced as she stood up, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had something to say. Her voice, though steady, rang out clearly in the silence. She presented her idea, a solution that no one had considered, a strategy that combined innovation with practicality. As she spoke, she noticed the executives exchanging glances. Her proposal was bold, yet grounded in reality. She could see them processing her words, the skepticism beginning to fade. When she finished, there was a long pause. The silence was deafening. Then, the chairman spoke up. "I think she's onto something," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and admiration. Slowly, the rest of the board nodded in agreement. They were convinced. Her idea would be implemented. Emma returned to her desk, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it again. She had proven, once more, that she belonged. But even with this victory, she couldn't shake the feeling that her journey was far from over. The work was never easy, and the stakes were always high. Yet, with every challenge she overcame, she felt herself growing stronger. The respect she had earned felt good, but it was the work itself that drove her. She wasn't here to prove anyone wrong anymore. She was here to build something of her own, something that reflected her values and her vision for the future. As the months went by, Emma's life outside of work began to shift as well. She started to reconnect with her roots, remembering the lessons her mother had taught her about hard work and perseverance. She knew that no matter how much success she achieved, she could never forget where she came from. One afternoon, she received a call from her mother. She had been offered a promotion at the cleaning service where she worked. It wasn't a huge leap in salary, but it was a sign that her own hard work was being recognized. Emma smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride for her mother. She had spent years watching her sacrifice for their future, and now, finally, it was paying off. When Emma went home that evening, she sat down with her mother over dinner and told her about the recent changes in her own life. Her mother listened intently, her eyes filled with pride as Emma recounted her accomplishments. "I'm so proud of you," her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've worked so hard. But remember, it's not just about success. It's about staying true to who you are, no matter how much the world changes. Emma nodded, taking in her mother's words. She had always known what truly mattered. Success was important, but it was the integrity and strength to remain grounded that would define her in the long run. As she looked out the window that evening, she knew her journey was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more moments where she would have to prove herself. But she was ready. She had come this far, and nothing was going to stop her now. Emma's success at the company continued to grow, but with it came a new set of challenges. The recognition she had gained from her peers and superiors wasn't enough to keep her from feeling the pressure. She had started as the maid's daughter, and despite her growing achievements, there were still those who saw her as an outsider, an imposter who didn't belong in the high-powered world she was now a part of. One day, as she sat at her desk reviewing a new project proposal, she overheard a conversation between two senior managers. They were discussing the upcoming promotion cycle, and Emma's name came up. "She's smart, no doubt," one of them said, "but she doesn't have the experience that the others do, and she's not from the right background." Emma's heart sank as she overheard those words. Despite everything she had accomplished, despite the respect she had earned, there were still whispers in the corridors, doubts about her place in the company. She had worked so hard to get here, and yet, she still had to fight for every bit of recognition. That evening, she went home feeling defeated, her mind racing with questions. Was it enough? Would she ever truly be seen as equal? Her mother, noticing her quiet mood, sat down beside her at the kitchen table. "What's wrong, Emma?" she asked gently. Emma hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I overheard something at work today," she said, her voice tight. "They don't think I belong. They think I'm not qualified enough. That I'm just the maid's daughter trying to play in their world." Her mother listened quietly, and then, after a long pause, spoke with conviction. "Emma, you've worked harder than anyone else to get where you are. You've earned every bit of success. Don't let anyone make you feel less than who you are. People may look at you and see your past, but you know who you are. You're not defined by where you come from. You're defined by what you've done, and you've done more than most people ever will." Emma felt a sense of calm wash over her as she listened to her mother's words. She had heard them before, but today, they felt different. They reminded her of everything she had achieved and everything she was capable of. The next morning, Emma walked into work with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to prove herself, not to anyone else, but to herself. That day, she took on a new challenge, leading a meeting with several key clients. She had prepared meticulously, and when it was her turn to speak, she stood tall and confident. As she presented her ideas, she could feel the eyes of her colleagues on her, but this time, it didn't bother her. She spoke with clarity and conviction, explaining her strategies and vision for the company. By the end of the meeting, the clients were impressed, and her colleagues, once skeptical, now looked at her with a new respect. Emma had done what they thought was impossible. She had proven that not only was she qualified, but she was a force to be reckoned with. As she left the meeting room, she couldn't help but smile. She knew there would always be challenges, but now, she was ready for them. She had learned that no matter where she came from, no matter how others saw her, she had the power to shape her own future. Emma didn't need anyone's approval to know that she belonged. She had already earned it. As Emma continued to thrive in her new role, her life began to take on a different pace. She had earned the respect she once longed for, and her career was moving forward at an astonishing rate. But with success came new challenges. The higher she climbed, the more the stakes seemed to rise. One day, Emma received an invitation to a high-profile event, the annual gala hosted by the billionaire who had offered her the first opportunity. The event was known for being an exclusive gathering, attended by the wealthiest and most influential people in the business world. As Emma prepared for the event, she couldn't shake the feeling that it would be a turning point in her journey. She had come so far, but she still felt like an outsider in this world of power and privilege. The evening of the gala arrived, and Emma found herself standing in front of a grand, elegantly decorated hall. The lights shimmered, and the sound of classical music filled the air. She adjusted her dress and took a deep breath before stepping inside. She was greeted by a sea of well-dressed individuals, each one a symbol of success in their own right. As she moved through the crowd, Emma noticed that many of the people around her were familiar faces from the business world. But instead of feeling intimidated, she felt a sense of quiet confidence. She had earned her place here. She was no longer just the maid's daughter. She was Emma, a young woman with a powerful presence and an undeniable talent. As the night went on, Emma found herself in a conversation with a prominent CEO, a woman she had admired for years. The CEO, seeing her confidence, complimented Emma on her achievements. "You've come a long way," she said with a smile. "I remember when you first started in this industry. It's impressive to see how far you've come." Emma smiled in return, but there was a hint of discomfort beneath her composure. She didn't want to be defined by where she had started. She wanted to be recognized for her abilities, not her past. "Thank you," Emma replied. "But I believe we're all capable of more than we're given credit for. It's just a matter of proving it." The CEO's eyes widened with admiration. "You're absolutely right. And I think you've proven more than most people ever will." Later that evening, as Emma stood by the grand staircase overlooking the ballroom, she caught sight of the billionaire. He was speaking with a group of executives, his usual air of authority surrounding him. He looked over and noticed Emma standing alone. He excused himself from the conversation and walked over to her. "You look like you're handling the night well," he said with a smile. "I've been hearing a lot of good things about you." Emma returned his smile, but this time, there was no hint of the nervousness she had felt the first time they had met. "I'm just here to prove that I belong," she said, her voice steady and confident. The billionaire nodded, clearly impressed. "You've more than proven that," he said. "But I have to ask, where do you go from here?" Emma paused for a moment, considering his question. She had never really thought that far ahead. Her focus had always been on the next step, the next challenge. But now, standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by people who had once seemed out of her reach, she realized that she was no longer just fighting to belong. She was fighting for something bigger. "I think I'm ready for something more," she said finally. "I'm ready to lead, not just follow." The billionaire studied her for a moment, then smiled. "I like that answer. Keep proving yourself, and you'll go even further than you can imagine." As Emma left the gala that night, she felt a sense of pride and anticipation. She had reached a milestone, but she knew that the real journey was just beginning. The challenges ahead would be even greater, but she was ready for them. She had already proven herself once, and she would prove herself again. Emma had long since outgrown the shadow of doubt that once loomed over her. The young girl who had walked into the bank months ago was now a woman with a career that was gaining unstoppable momentum. Yet, despite her success, she faced the kind of challenge that no amount of hard work could have fully prepared her for. It was the moment when personal and professional worlds collided. A new project came up, one that could solidify her place in the company for good. The opportunity was immense. A new international partnership that involved high-level negotiations with potential investors and partners across the globe. Emma knew that if she could manage this successfully, there would be no doubt that she had earned her place in the upper echelons of the business world. But with such an opportunity came the pressure of perfection. As Emma sat in the boardroom preparing for the first meeting, she felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. The room was full of executives and partners, all of them seasoned professionals, all of them much older than she was. Emma had faced intimidating situations before, but this was different. The stakes were higher, and failure was not an option. She was leading the meeting. Her mind raced as she went over the strategy she had meticulously prepared. Every detail mattered. Her voice would have to be clear, confident, and convincing. No one in the room could afford to doubt her capabilities. The meeting began, and Emma immediately took charge. She outlined the project goals, the potential risks, and the strategy for success. As she spoke, she could feel the eyes of the room on her. She didn't look at them. She focused on the task at hand. The more she spoke, the more she could feel the room start to shift. What had once been skepticism in their eyes was now slowly turning into admiration. She wasn't just the maid's daughter anymore. She was Emma, a young professional who was making things happen. Midway through the presentation, one of the senior partners, a man known for his sharp, critical nature, raised a question. It was a tough one, a question that had the potential to expose a weakness in her plan. Emma paused for a split second, but only for a second. She had anticipated the question. She answered confidently, addressing every detail, backing up her argument with facts and data. The man didn't interrupt, and by the end of her response, there was a glimmer of approval in his eyes. Emma smiled to herself, but she didn't let the victory distract her. She had a bigger battle to fight. The meeting continued, and as the hours passed, Emma's leadership became more and more evident. By the time the meeting ended, the deal was almost finalized. There was still some fine-tuning to do, but the investors were on board, and the new partnership was going to happen. As she walked out of the room, Emma felt a wave of exhaustion, but also immense pride. She had done it. She had proved herself once again. That night, she returned home and sat with her mother, who was anxiously awaiting her news. "How did it go?" her mother asked. Emma smiled, her tiredness fading as she spoke. "It went better than I could have imagined. We got the deal." Her mother's eyes lit up, and Emma could see the tears beginning to form. "I knew you could do it," her mother said softly. Emma reached across the table, taking her mother's hand. "I couldn't have done it without you. Everything I've achieved is because of you." Her mother squeezed her hand, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. The silence was filled with understanding, love, and pride. Emma had come a long way from the quiet girl who once feared that she didn't belong. Now, she was a force to be reckoned with, a leader in her own right. And though the journey was far from over, she knew that no challenge was too great for her to overcome. She had the strength, the determination, and the heart to go as far as she dreamed. Months later, Emma stood at the front of a grand conference room, overlooking a table full of executives and investors. The once nervous girl who had stepped into a bank with uncertainty was now a woman who had carved out her place in the world of business. Her journey had been long, filled with challenges that tested her at every turn, but she had never wavered. She had earned every bit of success she had achieved. The partnership she had secured months ago had flourished, and now, she was leading a project that would take her company to new heights. As she presented her latest plan, a vision that would redefine the industry, she felt the same sense of pride and determination she had when she first started. The room was filled with respect, not because of where she came from, but because of who she had become. After the presentation, as the room emptied, Emma was approached by the billionaire who had once offered her a chance. He walked over, his expression one of genuine admiration. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice carrying the weight of respect. "I've watched you grow, and I have to say, I'm proud of what you've accomplished." Emma smiled, but there was no longer any hesitation in her voice. "Thank you," she said, "but I didn't do it alone. My success is built on the sacrifices of people like my mother and the hard work I've put in. I never took any of it for granted." The billionaire nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "That's why you've made it. You've earned it." As Emma left the building that evening, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The girl who had once been dismissed as the maid's daughter had transformed into a leader, a woman whose presence commanded attention and respect. But beyond the recognition and the success, it was the journey that meant the most. She had learned that true success wasn't measured by wealth or titles, but by the impact you made on the world around you. The people you helped, the lessons you learned, and the strength you found in the face of adversity were what truly defined her. She had achieved more than she had ever dreamed, but in the process, she had discovered something even more valuable: the power of resilience, the importance of integrity, and the unwavering belief that no matter where you come from, you can create your own future. Emma looked out at the city skyline, her heart filled with gratitude. There was still much more to do, and many more challenges ahead, but she knew that nothing could stop her now. She had proven to herself, and to the world, that anything was possible when you believed in yourself and worked relentlessly toward your goals. The journey had just begun, and Emma was ready to take on whatever came next.